from a defabricated garden shed in Rockland County, New York, USA. This is Stand Up with Pete Dominic. On today's episode, exercise tips that may improve physical health but do nothing for your rapid cognitive decline. And now, the podcast host who has no worries for such things because he is more alert than a raven at the dumpster, Pete Dominic!
Thank you, Pico, and as always, it's like you see me. That was my high school nickname, Raven at a Dumpster, known for my alertness. Should have gone into security. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's show where my very special guest is the absolutely brilliant, hilarious, and quite wonderful Virginia Heffernan. I know you are going to love our conversation. Reminder, while it is Thursday, I will not be hosting a hangout tonight because I am doing the Intelligence Squared debate this evening at the Comedy Cellar in New York City with my friend John Donvan hosting, where they are debating whether or not the insurrection is an existential threat to America. Gonna go down there and warm up the audience tonight, hang out with my friend John Donvan. If you're in and around New York, I think there are still tickets available, but looking forward to that. But I am certainly going to miss you tonight. If you want to hang out on the Discord, I highly recommend you head over there around 8. The Discord chat. If you are a stand-up subscriber, you will know or should know all about that. It's at the details at the end of every day's email, how to hang out at the Discord, which is always great fun. Lots of cool people in there to talk about. You're never alone if you are a member of the stand-up community. At least that's what I like to believe. All right. Well, just a few headlines, a couple things I want to play for you before I post this baby up here early in the morning. First of all, the House is expected to pass a temporary spending measure, and that's going to fund the government through December 23rd to avert a government shutdown. That's a piece of good news. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates by 0.5 point, the highest level in 15 years. It looks like the price of things might be coming down, although rates still have a way to go, apparently. The Republican congressman who suggested that Trump declare martial law in a text to Mark Meadows said that his only regret is misspelling the word martial. So we're in really good shape there. And the Trump organization was found to have been, quote, willfully disobeying 4 grand jury subpoenas and 3 court orders during a criminal contempt trial held in secret last year, which is crazy, crazy news. One more, the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton has asked the Department of Public Safety for a list of transgender individuals in the state. So that sounds really scary, but what do we expect from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who is really scary? I'll be following that story for sure. I don't know who we is when I say that. Do I have a team of people? It's just me and Indy in a shed. Well, here's some good news. The 2 guys set out to sail from New Jersey to Florida, and they went missing for 10 days. They were discovered alive after almost dying. They definitely almost died. I read the story about it. It's a crazy story. They lost power. They lost their fuel. They burnt all their fuel out for their motor on this sailboat that they were on. It was a pretty good-sized sailboat, but they were adrift for like 10 days. Lost contact with their families. There's a whole search party out for them, the Coast Guard. But somehow, even in this day and age, they couldn't be found, and they almost died. Their mast on their ship broke in 40-foot waves. They ran out of water. They were sucking water out of whatever's remaining in the water lines. And they were discovered by a big tanker vessel. Also, I should mention they had a miniature poodle named Minnie on the sailboat as well. So that's really good news. A small miracle here at the middle of December. A holiday miracle for this family, for both these men's families. So I like that story and wanted to share it with you. Let me just go back real quick to that Republican Congressman, South Carolina Rep. Ralph Norman, calling for martial law to keep then President Trump in office. I see this as a military coup attempt. I don't like sometimes the rhetoric that I hear from people, including guests that are on the show. Sometimes it seems a little bit hyperbolic, but I think this is am I wrong? Is this not the definition of a military coup, at least our version of it. If the president of the United States doesn't like the results of the election and with no evidence says it was fraudulent and then encourages people to come up and attack the Capitol, if during that time he also had declared martial law, then that would have been military taking over and the president remaining in power, hence a military coup, right? I wonder how experts would define it, but I think that's not that far off. Here is President Biden's spokesman, John Kirby, his reaction to that text message in a press conference yesterday. The National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, John Kirby.
It's extraordinary to think that anyone would believe it appropriate to fight the results of a free and fair election in this country the way that so many chose to do that day. I mean, it is not a stretch to say that American democracy was literally under threat in those days and weeks after the election, and certainly on the 6th of January. And it stuns me that any elected member of Congress would condone that sort of drastic measure again to try to stymie and stifle and snuff out the will of the American people.
All right. Well, I thought John Kirby was fairly articulate on that point, and I think that's just such an important story that I don't think should be a one-day story or should go away. It seems that should be a pretty big deal discovery that Republican congressmen who are still in Congress we're asking for President Trump to overthrow the United States election and take over the government with the military because he lost. And apparently that congressman was asked about it and said that his only regret was that he didn't spell Marshall right. All right. Well, I also wanted to play something else for you, which is quite dramatic, but I thought really powerful. It's the Club Q survivor yesterday testifying, or it was a couple days ago, Michael Anderson. He appeared before the House Reform and Oversight Committee to shame the lawmakers that were continuing to allow weapons of war to circulate throughout U.S. basically unregulated, while at the same time, right-wing Republicans, conservative Americans in Congress, on radio, podcasts, YouTube channels, at school boards and town board meetings are promoting anti-LGBT hate. I wanted to play for you this brave young man, Michael Anderson, who was a survivor of the Club Q shooting. He appeared at this House committee in a powerful, almost 6-minute long statement. I'm going to play just the latter half of it. I thought it was really, really great and super important.
To the politicians and activists who accuse LGBTQ people of grooming children and being abusers, shame on you. As leaders of our country, it is your obligation to represent all of us, not just the ones you happen to agree with. Hate speech turns into hate action, and actions based on hate almost took my life from me at 25 years old. I beg you all to consider your words before you speak them, for someone may use those words to justify action that may take someone's life. To my fellow LGBTQ community, events like this are designed to discourage us from speaking and living our truth. They are designed to scare us from living openly, courageously, and proudly. We must not succumb to fear. We must live prouder and louder than ever before. We must continue to be who we are, for who we are is exactly who we are meant to be. And to the children watching this, feeling you may not be like the other kids, I understand you and I see you. You deserve to be exactly who you are, no matter what anyone else has to say. In the words of my personal icon, Christina Aguilera, you are beautiful no matter what they say. Words can't bring you down, so don't let them bring you down today. To Chairman Maloney, I thank you for making this a priority. To the House Oversight Committee, thank you for hearing us today. I hope my truth can help usher America into its next and greatest chapter yet. My name is Michael Anderson. I am 25 years old. I am a proud gay man, and now I am a survivor of a mass shooting. I hope we can work together to end this carnage in our country. Thank you.
All right. Well, that was, I thought, really powerful. The rest of it was as well. And that was great. Really, really hard to do and very, very brave. Michael Anderson is that guy's name. And all right. Well, those are a few of the news stories that I wanted to mention. A couple of things that I wanted to play. There are hundreds of other, obviously, really important news stories. I'm not going to go over all of them. Those are the ones I selected. I saw more. I'm always happy to hear from you in terms of what stories to mention, much less go deep on with a great guest. And today I have got one, and she is one of the best, one of probably the most thoughtful, intelligent, articulate, brilliant people I have had the opportunity to get to know a little bit and to read and follow and certainly have on the show. Her name is Virginia Heffernan. She's a journalist, a critic, an author, a speaker. She's got a great Substack, which I subscribe to. VirginiaHeffernan.substack.com. Magic and Loss is the name of the book she wrote about the wonders of the internet as art, titled. She's hosted some hit podcasts, including Trumpcast, which was on the Slate network, which has a lot of good podcasts. She's been called America's preeminent cultural critic, a public intellectual for the 21st century, and among the finest living writers of English prose. How about those accolades? The brilliant Kevin Kelly, who is the co-founder of Wired, writes, Virginia Heffernan is a new species of wizard. It is a joy and revelation to be under her spell. And I couldn't put it any better than that. vpheffernan.com is her website to learn more about her. Sign up for her Substack. It is invaluable. And here now, my conversation with her, I like to think, is too. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Virginia Heffernan.
We're 2 years since my complete Tucker Carlson pile-on nightmare of 2020. No, 2021 in February. So we've got, and we had upstate death threats, swatting, all kinds of stuff. So we could also talk about upstate New York. I mean, it's interesting to be in these kind of purple places, right? Like, you're not just in Brooklyn, you know?
It's the problem with it that I see is if you're a well-meaning white.
Yeah.
I'm a well-meaning white.
WMW.
If you're a, all right, I'm recording this, but
all right.
If you're a well-meaning white and you want to do the right thing and you're effective, you very well may be threatened. And you had this experience. I've had this experience, but it puts a chill on the well-meaning white, like, because I'm doing well. Why would I even get involved? Like, why am I going to mix this up and get in trouble when things are going well for my daughters and now all of a sudden I'm being targeted? It discourages and chills the well-meaning whites, Virginia.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that the less well-meaning whites, we're the ones they don't like, you know? All right, I'm going to tell you a crazy context for this. And I'm going to start so far afield, but I promise I'll try to bring it back.
Are you going to Rachel Maddow me?
Saddam Hussein. Yes, I am. Saddam Hussein. I give you Saddam Hussein. Do you remember he was executed by hanging by Iraqi officials, and there was a big debate at the time about whether the cameras the networks ought to show what they called the drop, just to talk about how macabre this whole thing was. But they ended up reporting on this historic execution outside the gallows by interviewing, and the Times did this, and other people did this, interviewing some Iraqi officials. And one of their questions was, what were Saddam Hussein's last words? I'm looking at you, Pete. I know you know that you're like, is she going to land this? Because it's totally irrelevant. But so the question was, what were his last words? And the officials said that his last words were death to America and the Zionist occupiers. All right, so we got that. That's what runs on the front page of the New York Times. Separate from that, it's the very beginning of, I don't remember the year, but it was the very beginning of some online video. And there were sites where soldiers in Iraq were sneaking out videos. And somehow on one of those platforms, a video snuck out taken from inside the gallows. So it actually showed Saddam Hussein's last words.
I watched the hell out of that video.
It was so strange. And it was greenish, remember? And it was like, and there was a lot of Arabic that had then been translated. And I was up late that night during the execution because I was covering the coverage of how television was going to cover it. And the video came somehow into my, you were probably as online as I was then, and that thing surfaced. And there was no way to verify what it was, but it was like you said, it was so fascinating and strange and unnerving. But when it was translated, what we learned is those weren't his last words. Those were not Saddam Hussein's last words. He did not say death to America and the Zionist occupiers, which, by the way, is what Iraq would have wanted him to say because they wanted the world on their side, right? His last words were Mustafa, Mustafa, Mustafa. I went everywhere. It was also, there's no God but God, and Allah's the only God. But then this name repeated. Searched everywhere, reported it out. Mustafa is a guy who crossed young Saddam Hussein when he was growing up in Tikrit. We are not mad at world problems. We're not even mad, as Tucker Carlson says, I don't hate Black people. I hate the 35-year-old lawyer, professional woman with a barren life. And then he turned to the camera and said, I hate you, to people, that I used to. So when I used to be, 20 years ago when I was a young professional white woman. He doesn't like his social group. He doesn't like the girls around him or women around him who he thinks look down on him. Just as Saddam Hussein didn't like this Mustafa character who, when they were 16, they had some conflict. So what's strange is this thing of it's the person that you imagine looks down on you, that reminds you a lot of, they have this brother-in-law thing. Every man wants to make more than his brother-in-law does. Like one person away. Yeah. And or the person that, you sort of are like, oh, that girl was so woke in my class and she didn't laugh at my jokes. And so I forever remember her. Not even, the conflicts, like these school board conflicts are often between people of the same social class who look very much alike over the bodies of people of color. Absolutely. Or trans people, who are not included in the conversation because the conversation are enacting like psychodramas that have nothing to do with them.
Yes, that's entirely accurate and a really interesting way of framing it, and also why it's important for woke white people to get involved and put themselves on the line, because we did have all the people of color that were involved were pretty much on our side, and we were also advocating for LGBT stuff as well during these times. But these people were just like me. They look like me. They had probably similar lives as me, and they hated me. Still hate me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, anyone can call up Tucker Carlson talking to Ben Smith, looking at the camera and just saying, I hate you. And then laughing, speaking to a woman of his social class and, who he decides has a barren social life. That's the woman in his sights. I'll give you just one more example that I think really chimes with what you went through. Let's imagine a conversation with Ron DeSantis that hasn't happened, but someone's sitting across from him and wants to have an actual good faith conversation about immigration. And the question she might ask him is, since the beginning of nation states, nations have had to decide what to do about their borders. We can imagine a continuum, from the beginning of, 17th century borders, a continuum from totally open borders to wall, shoot on sight, totally militarize the border.
Laser wall.
Right? The wall. Okay. We're all adults here. We can understand all of those. Now tell us what your policy is about immigration. That conversation, the answer that Ron DeSantis gives to that question is, I hate Martha's Vineyard. What? Okay, try to imagine explaining to a Guatemalan kid that got kicked to an island off Massachusetts, state of Massachusetts, why he's there and what that has to do with Ron DeSantis' policy on immigration. He would be told, well, Ron DeSantis went to Harvard in a town a little while ago. Oh, let me explain to you. Let me get a map of Massachusetts. Wait, you mean the Hamptons? No. The Hamptons are totally politically different. Martha's Vineyard is something. This is not a position on immigration, not even a far right position on immigration. It's some Tikrit Mustafa battle that he's having in his own head with someone he once met who went to Chilmark and he decided was a snob. I mean, this is how really we waste our one chance on earth.
Wokeness in general is the enemy. It is overwhelming how much we hear this from Republicans and right-wing pundits and talkers. And I did you see this guy on one of those right-wing news stations say he brought his daughter to American Girl doll store?
No.
He said, I'm obsessed with, do you know that dumb store?
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, I've had tea there many times.
Yeah, me too. And both daughters went through there. They both got their, what are they called? Like Me dolls, whatever. Yeah. This dude said, I brought and he said something like normal white, 6-year-old white, cute daughter there, and we couldn't find a doll that looked like her. It seems like American Girl store has been wokeified. And I'm obsessed with that moment. I'm obsessed with if you replace the word woke or wokeified or wokeism, what they mean. And I think you have a really good idea of what they mean in many cases. You've written about it. But when is this going to be over? This argument over wokeism, or this using this word to replace, I don't like women, brown people, gay people, whatever. I don't like sensitivity to them.
I mean, I think it's like the new proxy for political correctness, possibly for libtards, just a new word that means, I mean, it usually means white people that irritate you. It's often elites is the other word. And, the people who use the word elite, like Ron DeSantis, tend to always fit anyone's definition of elite themselves, which is a sort of bewildering. I promise you that elite is more common in the vocabularies of people with high social status who went to the Ivy League than anyone else. But, I think, and we were sort of hinting at this or getting at this in an earlier conversation, I think there's something really deep, I'm not going to both sides, and I'm not totally prepared to psychoanalyze the anti-woke, very heated discourse. But I do think there's something about the American Girl doll store. Is it American Girl store?
I don't
American
know. I'm not sure I care either, but we know what we're talking about. The American store. AG something. Yes.
You walk into the store that I've been there very recently, and there is certainly no shortage of white dolls. But you walk into the store and you decide that you're going to lose your daughter. Like, there's this really primordial fear that your daughter is going to grow up and not want dolls forever. And when they're 6, say, or they're 7, they've just started to go to school, they're going to learn things that you don't know. They're going to learn about gay people or trans people or people who speak other languages or people from different social classes, because that's what education is. They are coming to know something you don't know, right? And that is frustration on many levels. It's many people. I think it is shared. You can hear it in the voices of immigrants who worry that their kids are going to learn the language they speak at home. You can learn. You can, even people saying, kids don't learn handwriting. They don't learn to write letters anymore. They don't say the Pledge of Allegiance. They don't learn. In my case, you heard me mentioning this. I had very, very left-wing education. But it was not around the subject of race. It was around the subject of by Sovietologists telling us about how Europe was going to fall, and it was soon, and we were going to all, be the workers of the world were going to be in a working man's paradise soon. And those were not things that my parents had grown up learning, right? They like all kinds of things like that. And if you pore over the curriculum, you will learn the horrible fact that kids don't learn things that you don't know. And, it's 100 years. In 2025, we'll be celebrating 100 years since the Scopes trial, the great monkey trial that argued at which a teacher in Tennessee was defended in the act of teaching evolution. It was actually a very simplistic version in the biology class of something like evolution. You all know that, this. It was a movie. It was a play. The origins of that are exactly like the origins of these school board conversations. A farmer described himself as not a reader, unlettered, didn't read very well. Was told that some of the high school kids were coming home saying they didn't believe in God anymore. Just that, didn't believe in God. They were atheists. Okay, who didn't go home to their parents and say, you know what, I don't believe in your stupid God. I know I did. But anyway, they came home and did that. And the idea was not, these kids are growing up. oh, these kids are, lighting out like I did. They're rebelling in some way. It was, we've got to stop this, and we've got to find the line in the curriculum that is making these kids rebel. So without any objection to the biology classes or the civics classes or any classes taught in Tennessee in 1925, they just combed over the curriculum till they could find something to blame for the atheism. You learn a lot of stuff in school that's incompatible with the literal truth of the Bible. I mean, if they taught the properties of water in this class, they might have said, but that suggests the Red Sea couldn't have parted. But they decided that the teaching... Are
they teaching the properties of water to my kid now?
Not my kid's going to learn this. Right, exactly. You will go back and see that drawing of the Red Sea where it parts. But so exactly. So they look at this evolution thing, and they decide that this is, contradicts the literal teachings of the Bible, thus is the source of their atheism. These things represent, education is the kid coming home and saying, you know what, I believe something different than the thing you taught me. And frankly, I think you're a rube. I don't know how many times you have faced this, Pete, but you're not protected by being progressive. I mean, my kids did Jewish day school and learned Hebrew, which I don't know. They know all kinds of things now that I don't know. They bring it home and are like, you don't understand blockchain. You don't understand AI. You don't know who Sam Bankman-Fried is. And, it's an onslaught. It's a siege of being taught that you're told you're an idiot. And I'm sorry, but that has to happen to the American Girl doll guy. It has to happen to the, God-fearing parent whose kid learns evolution or about sex. It has to learn someone who taught their kids that the founding fathers were gods on earth and suddenly have to learn that they're slave owners. I mean, these things it's called education.
Ted made a simple point, and I got in a lot of trouble at the board meeting. Like, if your kid is coming home and you're upset about something that they're learning, or more importantly, I guess a lot of parents are saying, my kid is upset about something they're learning. They feel guilt being a white person. My answer at the board meeting, and I said this and it got me in a lot of hot water, I was like, that's not a school problem. That's a you problem. That's a parenting issue. It's an ego issue. I never felt that way, and I didn't have those talks with my dad. And I've heard you say that too. Like, you didn't connect any of learning of those things with a sense of guilt, or that it projected something about who you were. It's, as you just said, it's the parents worrying that their kids are learning something that might not be in line with their, quote, values is my understanding. But that's, as you just said, that's what education often, not always, but often is.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that you would have your own ideas and superstitions battle tested in school, and that would be what was interesting about it.
Yeah.
That it's different from Sunday school and it's different from dinner time conversation. And that's what makes families feel differently about this. I mean, Pete, you might have gone to school and thought, this isn't disloyalty to my family as much as an adventure, an enterprising action of joining the world. And I remember coming home and telling my mother about these Hopi Indians that were Hopi indigenous people, a Hopi tribe who lived around, our neighborhood. And I just wanted to know everything about them. And I wanted to be the boss of the topic. I wanted to be you don't understand anything about their arrowheads and this tanning process and this thing.
What an insufferable child you must have been.
What a nightmare. And there was no special politics in it. I just wanted to be a know-it-all, right? And it seems like I probably came home and described, George Washington's 4 different plantations with slaves on them in the same way, not in a way I learned something new, factually true. I mean, what could it possibly, a values education or an ethical education happens in a different place, right, than a history class? You come home filled with complexifying your idea of things. I don't know what it would be to walk through the world and think, I want to be sure that my kids believe that racism's in the rearview mirror. One thing I want from their education is for them never to doubt that it all ended in 1963 or it all ended with the Emancipation Proclamation. How is that an educational goal?
You're giving some of them, many of them, a little bit too much of a benefit of the doubt that they would cite dates and proclamations, because you will hear some people argue now, the origins of the Civil War, much less black folks had it better here and whatever. I mean, you hear that stuff has become somewhat mainstream-ish. So,
well, I guess what I also would like to ask, aside from the 1776 project, which is pretty thin, what would people who object to the teaching of anything that touches on, quote, CRT, meaning a book about race or racism, what do they actually want to have taught in schools? So this is my new, show me your humanities curriculum, everything. Like, I know you don't want them to read Beloved. Do you want them to read, are you a big Steinbeck person? Are we doing like Of Mice and Men and Grapes of Wrath? Do you think they should do the whole East of Eden? Do you think they should do all of Steinbeck? Or, you want something really traditional? Do you mean nothing past Shakespeare? You want Greek and Latin? Like, I don't hear anything that looks like an educational program except not that. I
would say that
this is a very literate group of people.
I might have an answer for that. I think they want to teach things in their own image, the way that they believe them. A lot of parents obviously homeschool because of this. But I was just telling you, I think before I hit record, that Ron DeSantis convened a panel yesterday. They want to have alternative slates of electors, much less alternative to the CDC. So they want to have an alternative to what is ever accepted through history or through today's scientific institutions or theories, so that they can have an alternative kind of reality outside of what do they call us? The normies? I don't know.
What did they learn? Like, is this Jonathan Turley's version of constant? Well, exactly. That's what I mean about the I Hate Martha's Vineyard. I mean, to give them the benefit of the doubt, like, let's have them read, I don't know, Edmund Burke or Buckley or whatever wholesome text they want to read. So they're reading the Bible, say, in a public school, mind you. But let's say that all they can agree on, like Donald Trump, is the only two books worth reading are the Bible and The Art of the Deal. Say, okay, I'm going to go crazy and say, what does that curriculum look like? Are they reading King James? Are they reading some newer translation? How do they work through it? Do they go through the Old Testament? Do they learn some Aramaic? Do they learn, what does that even look like? What does the school year look like? All of it is they're being taught to hate Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah,
what I don't hear is what the physics curriculum looks like, the chemistry curriculum looks like, the English curriculum, the history curriculum.
They have, they don't have as many issues with those. They have their Koreshian ideological education, which controls people, and that's kind of where it seems to end. There's not a lot of there. I mean, it's wild talking to educators and hearing librarians and teachers talk about parents' interference, and it's crazy to me that it was such a controversy that McAuliffe, who is running for governor, said parents shouldn't be involved with the decisions being made at school. I fucking agree with that. I agree.
Yeah,
you get to go to the board, you get to elect board members, you get to talk to the teachers, but you don't in the end get to decide what gets taught, because you don't have a master's degree and because you do something else, and you wouldn't want your kid's science teacher to come over to your job and knock the blank out of your mouth.
That's right. I mean, come on. Also, who has this time on their hands? I was so happy to send my kids to school and be like, you teach them something. I'm at the end of, shoe tying is about as far along as I can get right now. But I mean, you know what I mean? For primary school and secondary school education, I don't know those subjects. Come on. You look at your math homework of any kid.
Oh, God, no.
Polynomials, man, did we really do those at some point in our lives?
My issue is, I told the principal at our school, get a new superintendent, I go, every parent has a problem with what is being taught in school. And I'm serious when I say I do not think my daughter needs to learn for one more day algebra. She's a bird in a cage. Let her go. She doesn't need it. Sorry. And you're offended by that, Virginia?
I'm shocked. Come on. Algebra's the best.
It's the worst. And I have never felt so much hostility towards you or anything that you believe. But finally, it brought me so much anxiety in high school because I couldn't figure it out. And part of it was the teacher. And then I went to summer school to get a different teacher and I learned it. But part of why I went into comedy and entertainment was a promise I kept to myself. I would never need algebra.
Do something where you don't need algebra. I mean, the history of algebra is amazing.
The larger point is that everybody is entitled to have an issue with what subjects your kids are learning, what books they're reading. Like everybody, I get that. That's fine. You can, by the way, you can opt your kid out. But the idea that you want to have a say in your kid's education, but you've never gone to a parent-teacher conference, you don't know their name, like all of a sudden you've decided that you're going to be the teacher deciding curriculum. That's not, a society can't function that way. You can't have a public education system that way. That's for damn sure.
They're just, it's a cortisol spiking exercise in, brain cell bruising exercise in how to fight with your literal neighbors. I mean, this is a collective project, raising these kids and getting them educated, and also not good outcomes if you give them a totally provincial, superstitious education. I mean, there's, presumably some of us don't want our kids to just like stay at home, live our values all the time. We want them to light out into the world and seek their fortunes and find their own adventures. And you don't do well if you go to college and all you know is George Washington was the godlike father of our country, or the Emancipation Proclamation ended racism. You're starting at such a deep disadvantage. I mean, you'd think at least parents might have ambitions for their kids. I mean, once some of these high schools get passed over, like nobody in them gets into the University of Texas at Austin, right? Because they're assumed to not have a good education.
Right.
That maybe would change things. It's just like, you guys in your public schools can teach what you want, but we need to have educated freshmen coming into the University of Texas. And so we sadly don't pay attention to your school anymore.
It's wild. Like if you look at American history, public school education inarguably is what created this country into many of the positive things it is. And the schools that your kids get into, if they go to a good public school, is another metric for it's going well. And they want to destroy all of those things, not understanding, I think, the comprehensive results of all that it has created and continues to create. It's like weird to see them attacking our school when it's one of the top high schools in the country. It's like, but a lot of times they make, like, this is the whole point. They make stuff up. They cherry pick getting to the Twitter files and Twitter in general. And then they create a controversy, which I call a ghost manufactured issue. And then they elect people around it. I mean, the Virginia governor, it was so much about that. It wasn't happening. CRT, he set up a hotline for parents to report CRT. No one called. No one ever called it after he got elected because it's not a thing. It never was, and it still isn't. So,
it's the name put on. Yeah. I mean, I think the fact that something that it's such a roving target that like 100 years ago, nobody talks about the teaching of evolution anymore. I don't get it. I guess they got used to it, or it didn't matter. Then sex ed was a huge problem at various times in history. Like when William Buckley wrote God and Man at Yale, he thought that it was possible that some of his economics professors were atheists. And that was a reason to object to it. Or that one or two of them were in favor of Keynesian economics and not total laissez-faire economics. And this is when Yale was all male, all white, and many of the professors were still collared members of the clergy, and still a conservative can find something to object to. So you go back to 1925, they're hating evolution. You go to 47 or whatever, when Buckley writes God and Man at Yale, they're suddenly hating Keynes and that there might be, again, some atheists among the faculty in science, in the sciences, or in economics. Finally, sex ed, right? We are not hearing about sex ed anymore. We're not hearing about, you need a true love waits curriculum or an abstinence only curriculum, because these things are, as you say, insincere, in bad faith. They're not what they're worried about. They're having a different fight. Now, all of a sudden, we have a true fiction, which is that there is some kind of thoroughgoing legal critique grounded in critical race theory that is suddenly hijacking the brains of poor, innocent white children. None of these are happening.
It's a really fascinating and important timeline. And I'm going to share that. That's going to be the excerpt from this conversation now, because that puts a lot into context. But when it comes to sex ed, I mean, we haven't talked really about this part of it, but it is part and parcel with everything else, the CRT stuff, the getting rid of this book or that book, which is just in the library to help a gay person feel seen and figure out who they are, because nobody knows who they are at that point. And my thing is like, wait, any book a child will start and read is a good book. That's it, because we are in a world now where even adults who you have a PhD in literature from Harvard. I mean, I bet you'd tell me, and, you know, obviously you wrote Magic and Loss about the internet and the wonders, but that your reading has certainly changed. But my point is, like, why are we having this arcane argument about sex ed when my kid and your kid and any other kid, I used to look at catalogs to find a woman nude. Maybe I'd get a Playboy if I got lucky, or a National Geographic where it was a woman's culture to go topless. And that was made my day. You can go on the internet and find anything sexual you want. The idea of taking a book out of the library is a bizarre. It's not going to do anything. Your kid will find whatever they want to find. We found it then, and they will certainly find it now.
Yeah. I mean, there's an up and down. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The old Why Johnny Can't Read book about literacy in America tanking. I think it was in the 60s or the 70s. And now there are reports that, in New York, some of the New York public schools, that the majority are illiterate in both mathematics and in traditional literacy and language.
Wow.
It's the majority of the students. So, you're right. We've gotten ahead of ourselves. The book is not called Why Johnny Can't Read Bell Hooks. It's called Why Johnny Can't Read at All. Would that the kids were trying to read bell hooks. I just, give them all a try. If they start hiding that, you know what I mean? And that's the secret thing that they want to read, I think we'd all be lucky.
Well, they'll start banning certain words.
I will say that some former ex-Mormon friends of mine were just explaining that the reason so many people left the Mormon church starting in the 90s was because of the internet. That one day they got to put Joseph Smith, even because Mormonism made a terrible mistake of making it that you had to believe every single literal truth of the Book of Mormon.
Well, that's true of the larger conversation that we're having. You trying to protect what your children, or even your own interests, if you're a religious person, can be exposed to for concerned that they will no longer believe what you want them to believe. Part of the problem is that parents think they own their children. I think that's a huge issue.
That's it. I mean, that's it. But I think the way to
even if you think you own your kid, once you do until they're 11, maybe 10, as soon as they go out, they are owned by the world now. And I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it's just a silly theory.
I mean, from the moment you show your kid something you loved, skateboarding, and they say I don't want to do that, you're already grieving, and it's a grieving process that it's the hardest part of parenting to be oh, look, they're not going to be exactly like me. You don't like going to summer camp. I thought that would be the greatest thing that ever happened to you, and it turns out that you were miserable there. Or vice versa. I was miserable, and look at you. You're a sunny kid that can throw a Frisbee. What do you know? I mean, my kids have gone off in such, my daughter just cut her own mullet. Just took some scissors and just chopped a mullet. Honestly, it's not about whether I'm progressive or not progressive. You just have an impulse. No, don't cut it. And I think that that's the same thing here. Some kid comes home one day and says, like I did to my dad. I remember saying, Dad, I know. We said the Lord's Prayer at dinner. And at the end, he said, not the Lord's Prayer, but we said grace. And he said, Amen. And I was like, ha, God, I don't believe in God. And my dad was like, well, look at you. You're Voltaire. This is the 18th century. It just made huge fun of me. It's just as if I was the first person in the world to ever come home and tell her dad I didn't believe in God. That you can the Bohr model, which we learned, the model of an atom, or Pluto being the 8th or whatever planet. The names of all the dinosaurs, these things change. They're different than when we were kids. And our kids learn those things as part of getting educated. And it is a tragedy. And also it is something that we cannot interfere with, or we are wrecking our kids' lives.
Well, I mean, for example, you keep pointing to things that are not necessarily accepted. There are a lot of people in this country, maybe 20%, who think we walked with the dinosaurs, walked right there with them.
But what names did they call them by? Were they still a Tyrannosaurus Rex? I mean, I'm sure we were speaking English then, because that was all in America, right?
I think they harnessed them as work animals, according to a certain cartoon that made a big impression on me growing up. Let me ask you about your most recent articles, or at least article, because I want to talk about this forever, at Wired, where you are, of course, a contributor. And everybody should be reading, and I've said this already, but Virginia's and subscribing to her Substack, virginiaheffernan.substack.com, Magic and Loss. It is so good. And so many really, you even wrote about Sesame Street's Bob McGrath, who just passed away, which I really enjoyed. But I wanted to ask you about your Wired piece, Let Twitter Devolve into Porn. It's always pleasing to see things become what deep down what they are. You know about this as much as anybody because you wrote Magic and Loss. You've researched the internet. You're an expert in kind of digital culture, and you are making a prediction about that Twitter is going to become what everything online really naturally wants to become if it weren't for human interference controlling it to sell things. Is that, how am I doing?
So something like that. I mean, have you, do you remember Avenue Q? I mean, like 20 years ago, which is amazing. One of the songs in it was "The Internet is for Porn," right? So like, it was just an article of faith with everyone on the internet about 20 years ago that like porn was really like wherever you were on the internet, it was right around the corner, whether you were like looking at Wikipedia or whatever .com era thing. That sort of disappeared in part because Steve Jobs was super prudish. And when he first banned Flash from phones, but then led video and music on our phones, he was like pretty Tipper Gore about it. He liked to keep things PG. There's something in the clean Apple aesthetic that's not like he never introduced the iPad with like, what's that thing called? The porn site that everyone uses. Oh my God, help.
I can't help you. I'm so sorry. I have no idea. Is it YouPorn or Pornhub or
Pornhub. Steve Jobs is not showing Pornhub when he like introduces a new product. So anyway, he's gone but Apple's remained that way. And YouTube also, because some of the other early video sites were like, there was one called Gorilla Mask. They were really, really sketch and porny. And YouTube just set up this thing where they were like, we are not letting porn on here because it's like a predator plant. If you let some flesh-covered pixels in a couple of videos, they just like migrate over like Spanish.
When you said predator plant, I thought of like a person being a predator, but you're talking about like an invasive species.
Yes, which are like all around, right? Like in Ulster County and stuff. There's plenty.
Oh, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. Yeah.
Right?
So if you let porn on your platform, if you allow for porn on any platform, in any space, even maybe, it takes over?
It can take over. I mean, you can do, and Twitter has successfully kept it to 13% of the content. And as we all know, moderation has to be on social media. It is just such a vigorous, tireless 24-hour operation all the time and around the globe. And if you're letting on porn at all, right, you have, you're making sure it's consensual. You're doing automatic lifetime bans for anyone who puts up creep stuff, upskirts, revenge porn, obviously, and child porn. And so, that's an operation, right? But Twitter did manage to keep it to 13%, but that's like cutting back your predator plant. And you and I have talked about weeding before. And, that's a lot. And Elon Musk just fired all his moderators. So there's a kind of entropy that I think may already take over Twitter. I mean, they're like empty lots and it's just all confusing there now. But of course, it's also so much hate speech and Nazis and weirdos and trolls, and it's just so much less fun. I don't even see the people, right? It's like,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely less fun. There's definitely a lot of concern about what's happening, but I'm still finding, I'm able to curate and still go find. Like I went through your whole Twitter timeline for a while today, and I enjoyed it as I always do. And the same is for other people. So I feel like if I want to, I can find what I'm looking for. But just clicking on my who do I follow timeline stuff, mostly I'm buying wrenches.
I mean, Yeah, I mean, some of it just feels like a ghost town with tumbleweed and empty lots, and then like a couple of sharks and jets in corners with their switchblades.
Let me just read this from this piece, because you're one of my favorite writers, and I'll try to perform it. You write, "The internet is for porn," quote, that's the name of the song, "was the catchiest song from Avenue Q, which debuted 20 years ago. That was before broadband, before social media, before the hijack of information space by influence operations and strongman solo acts like GOP Trinity, Kanye, Elon, and Trump. It was axiomatic back then. Porn was the internet's reason for being, its prime directive. And it would have stayed that way had web information not been domesticated by corporations that wanted to hack our worldviews and pick our pockets for data, attention, and mobile payments." You kind of covered a lot of that, what I just read, but I wanted to just put it all in one place for people's head and hope they go read that and all of the rest of your stuff. But what would you add to that in terms of picking our pockets for data, attention, and mobile payments?
Well, I mean, some people liked Vegas the way it was, and then some people hated it when it got, family friendly. And the same is true with Times Square in New York. That, Times Square, when I first moved to New York, was terrible to walk through, there was a lot of porn, but it was fun, and I was young, and I thought it was interesting, and it was, it was edgy or whatever. And then it became filled with Disney stores and stuff, and it wasn't my jam. But then I had kids, and it was my jam, right? So like what happened to the internet that was like, it felt like 70s New York there in certain periods when it was just like, it was hard to search. There was weird stuff. It was like back office clerics, and you would just find weird stuff. And then it was domesticated largely by Facebook, which turned it into a data mining operation and just ate the internet with like this very banal interface, made us use our real names. So we weren't, there was no more fun of like masquerade and backstabbing in that way, although it resurfaced on Twitter. But also made us sitting ducks for advertising, because our immune, we let our defenses down. If you see a picture of your aunt, you're using your real name, you're on Facebook. Then when something gets shoveled at you, like the vaccines contain a chip from Bill Gates, you're more likely to accept it than if you're on like an old bulletin board and everything around you is people like cosplaying vampires and like, writing about damsels and steeds and Led Zeppelin. And then someone says some vaccine thing and you're just like, oh, that's all part of this fictional world I've been part of. So the domestication cut both ways, right? It got so many more people online and connected and doing interesting stuff and made it safer for people. But it also meant that your guard was down so you could have stuff sold to you, which is like people blow a lot more money at Vegas now that it has great restaurants and expensive hotels and stuff for kids than even they used to when it was just like a bunch of, people around a poker table. So we shed our money and our inhibitions because we think it's safer than it is. So one idea for Twitter is if Musk is completely committed to dropping all the, guardrails to hate speech and other kind of content that works on our bodies like porn does or snuff does, frankly, that's just like really violent, angry language, memes that are meant to like unsettle you and destabilize you, disgusting, terrifying fictional stories about pedophilia and about, sucking blood of children. I mean, it's crazy. It's like it's like garbage pail kids kind of thing. It's like, how gross can I make it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, what about snot and a razor blade and a thing? Just
well, like I mean, that's what they've done with the whole issue about trans and surgery. I mean, they've made that as cutting
mutilation off yes, exactly.
Mutilation.
So, I mean, when that snuff and porn style language starts to take over a place, I think like, why not just give into the predator plant that is pornography and just let it go the way of OnlyFans, which is like a way for sex workers to monetize amateur pornographic content and possibly advertise their services. You still need a lot of moderation. You still need to be sure that everything's consensual. And like, I don't envy someone running a porn shop. It takes a lot. But that demimonde has its own logic. And I feel like Elon Musk he's not really reading the room. He's not really good on the main stage. He's not funny. He has his one pronouns joke that he seems to find hilarious, but that is like, it's hard to see someone miss the mark of humor all the time.
Well, here's something. People have talked for a long time that he's somewhere on the spectrum, and they're, I don't want to villainize people that are on the spectrum in any way, at all, but there's something that's off with him that makes him.
Yeah.
I mean, which is why he's gotten kicked out of so many rooms that he's been in and boards that he's been on. He's got a real lack of maybe understanding how his words and actions affect people's lives, which is common to a certain type of person on the spectrum, is not having a certain awareness.
Yeah. Well, also just frankly being so unfunny. I mean, there's a great analysis of his failures of humor in Slate, and like, Pete, you're like a natively funny person. So
I guess I just never thought of him as someone who would even, I don't know, humor and CEOs. I don't know. I guess I just didn't really, I was like, that's not what he's here for. He's a visionary, and they're usually not that funny because they don't want to distract from their whatever bullshit.
But trolling like is supposed to get like a fun rise out of you. And
he's doing it wrong.
There's this sort of there's this meme. It's like, it's elaborate, but it's like the R thing from Reddit /one joke. Have you ever seen it?
No.
And it's whenever right wingers make pronoun jokes, you just like bash back with Reddit one joke because they have one joke, because pronouns. My pronouns are.
Yeah.
And anyway, so if Elon Musk is giving into the like lowest common denominator of humor, and he doesn't really seem to have like a robust formal idea of what the site could be, why not just give in? Why not give it a try? It makes money. It's a classic. The internet likes to be it, and not safe for work content is rising on Twitter anyway. And also, I'm not a porn person. God bless everyone who loves porn, but a lot of porn there plus hate speech will make it so quittable. You know?
Yeah, but you're selling quitting Twitter, and I'm still not even remote. Like, I still am mourning its devolution. It's been a really great place, and then you can talk about the horrible things it could become, and without, the one thing that's definitely worse than porn is being anti-vax. And today he let all those quack doctors back on Twitter, and it's like, that's what I'm most concerned about. I'm less concerned about those who are trying to end democracy than I am those who are trying to end vaccines.
I mean,
like, that to me is
right. I think partly that's the point, is that pornography is if what he wants to do is troll everyone and be outrageous and be cool and be shocking and be interesting and funny and edgy, then porn is a way better space than vaccine denial, right? Like, vaccine denial is meant to get a rise out of people because it's like so hated, and he can think that he's cool by having different voices or whatever. But that is A, not going to make him any money, and B, incredibly dangerous, where pornography done right is good for people.
Well, except for you're not considering a situation where the plot is two people have a fight about vaccinations and then they have makeup sex.
Oh my God. I mean, that is going too far. I mean, if that's your kink, I think that's, yeah. I mean, also a vax person and an anti-vax person attracted to each other. Wait, Pete, you might be onto something.
I'm starting a site. I need the money.
I think sexuality is better than the proxies for arousal and desire that are things like anti-vax, right? Like,
very well
I'd rather have people with like plushies or three-ways or whatever than. Geez, I mean, you're forcing me to consider those, and I'm like, I wonder if you're more aroused by blowing past me in your big pickup truck because I have an EV, and then yelling something and calling me a woke libtard than you actually would be to have sex with a beautiful person. I think that is the question that maybe this site can ask, which is just like, you've been jerking off to your gun, so let's try jerking off to like a pretty image of a person that you would be want to have sex with, just as a new variety. All the crying over that choice is what I'm here for. Like, it's always a fun thought experiment. Everything is with you. I'll let you go. We've been talking for almost an hour, and I cannot thank you enough. I will be following you and excited whenever a new piece comes out, much less a new tweet. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it, as always. Thank you, Pete. All right, there she goes, everybody. How was that? Virginia Heffernan, always so good. Go read her. Read everything she's writing. VirginiaHeffernan.substack.com. Of course, read her at Wired, and
I will have her on as often as I can. I do have some regret, and I almost edited it out, that at the beginning I talked about the well-meaning whites and whatnot. I don't have any regret about talking about them or that phrase. I mean that I in any way would scare people away from getting involved, especially locally in their school board election or town election or anything like that, because I don't think that it's likely that you're going to find yourself being threatened and in harm's way in any way. I don't think that. I think that if you're loud and proud, sometimes you can put a target on yourself. I want to make sure that I encourage people and that most people are good and most people will not have to deal with that. If they get involved, there's all kinds of quiet ways to get involved and create change locally and on a larger level as well. So stand up for something. It's always been the premise. You don't have to stand up for everything. I'm toning it down a little bit. You don't have to stand up all the time, but stand up for something and fight apathy has always been what I'm trying to do here for myself, my own family, and for my community. So definitely get involved, and I just wanted to say that here at the end. All right. Thank you very much for listening. Sorry I won't be with you tonight. I will talk to you tomorrow here on Stand Up, as I do each weekday, here every day and sometimes more. Follow me on the social medias. I'll see you on the internet, maybe even in person. And I am so grateful that you press play. Go give a review if you have it on Spotify or iTunes. Those matter so much. Someone just gave one I saw yesterday, which is great. And please consider a subscription to this podcast so that I can keep doing it. StandUpWithPete.com, Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. John Carroll wrote this song. He sang this song. JohnCarroll.org if you want to buy it and support him. And if you haven't, you should. It's like $3.99. It goes for JohnCarroll.org. Thanks, Pete Coe, for the voice over introduction. And I will talk to you tomorrow.